Hello, and welcome to the Weekly Scroll Podcast. My name is Ryan, and with me, we have a very special guest who anyone that watches the show would have seen just a couple days ago. That is Josh Domanski. How you doing this morning, Josh?
Hello. I am very well.
Good. Josh might be our last guest for the month of horror. Hunter is currently driving across the country and heading to his final destination for a recent move, and he might be back next week. But Josh is quickly becoming a regular staple here on the show, since he will be hosting a lot of our side quests, which, for those that don't know, it is our kind of actual play one-shot series to teach kind of games we reviewed here on the show. And Josh is a fantastic GM, so it is a real catch to have him running that for us. Josh, for those that might not know you, who the heck are you? What might they know you for?
So I am a writer and designer in the indie tabletop RPG scene. I say that I'm an occasional actual play host, and that's becoming a little more frequent now with the side quest thing, but hire me. I think the most notable work that I've done so far is with Liminal Horror. I've been working on some of the ventures for them for a while, and I'm officially one of the partners of the Liminal Horror system going forward into the future. So most recently, the work that's been out digitally for a while now, but we just got it into print, is The Bloom. It's our most recent adventure. People seem to like it. So go check it out. But I also did The Bureau, which is sort of, I think that's probably the most well-known liminal horror adventure at this point. I seem to see that sort of get organic coverage, like people talking about it in spheres that are not the ones that we inhabit. But I co-wrote that and did the layout and design for it. I don't know. I got little bits and pieces kind of everywhere too, so I pop up in random stuff. Oh, Outer Rim Uprising, Mothership Bundle, Through the Lost Bay. Go check that out too.
There you go. It's only like a million. It's only 1,000,000% funded right now, but you should definitely go check that out. And we will. You'll see something about that on here eventually, I guess.
Eventually.
So today, what we're doing, what myself and Josh are going to go through, is a continuation of our month of horror here. For, again, those that were watching a few days ago, Josh hosted a side quest for Liminal Horror on Friday the 13th for a prequel adventure to The Bloom. And I'll be dropping that on podcast and YouTube after we finish this episode today. But he's back to go over They Feed on Fear, written by Alexei Vella. This is a horror RPG. I have the physical with me. I'll kind of flip through that real quick, and then we'll actually have Josh kind of intro it a little bit, because he did more work for this episode than I've ever done. And we'll kind of go from there. But the book is great. It's a nice little printed perfect bound. And when you buy it, you get this 2 character sheets with a map that's in the book on the back, which I'm sure we'll discuss because it's kind of a map. You get a nice little sticker. There's a collectible card. I feel like there's only one though, but I do like the vibe of this really neat little collectible card for a Fright of Fear Eaters. And then you get a quote unquote provider. What's the GM called in this?
Oh shit!
I almost said the provider.
Provider, yeah, provider.
Oh, it is provider, yeah. A little provider screen, which again we'll also talk about, but the art on it is fantastic, and I think we're gonna sing the praises of the art pretty frequently coming up. But so Josh, what is They Feed on Fear?
Sure. I will note at the top here that I did order a physical copy, but unfortunately it didn't arrive. So my views are going to be purely based on the digital files instead of that sweet physical form. But so They Feed on Fear, it's a little system that was put out by Alexei Vella. If I got this correct, Alexei is a Canadian designer, and they're like a real graphic designer. And let's see, I looked up their work. because the Alexei's got a website here, but I guess they did some stuff in the Delta Sky magazine. There's a whole other couple of magazines. There's the Atlantic, Forbes, Boston Globe, Variety, and just a whole bunch of other like legitimate graphic design work. Um, so yeah, Alexei's one of those triple threats that is ever so dangerous in the indie RPG scene, where they write, they do layout, they do art, and it's all really frustrating because most of it's pretty damn good.
Yep.
Yeah, but yeah, I've been following Alexei's work for a while here. Um, God, one of the interesting things, again, talking about that triple threat, is that my sort of favorite work that Alexei's done is Liminal Space. It's like a little GM-less game where you are exploring liminal spaces. I think that's kind of a summary there, but um, God, this is like so good, but it's so frustrating because when I set out to write or do the design for the bureau, this is a year or so more than that at this point. I wanted it to look like this. I just wasn't that good of a graphic designer at this point. And so picking up this book, it makes me very jealous. But beyond that, I've been following Alexei's work for quite a while. Sort of more by coincidence than anything to end up on this episode here. I think it was their first TTRPG release, but Alexei put out this little pamphlet in 2020. It's called Panic on Pyramid Prime. It is a trifold adventure for Troika, and it was part of the Troika Pamphlet Adventure Jam that was back in 2020. This was I think the jam had finished before I discovered Troika, because I picked it up for the first time in 2020. And it was before I started doing really any like RPG work on my own. But finding that jam, getting into Troika, looking into stuff, seeing the trifold pamphlets for Troika, and specifically that jam, is kind of what led me to start doing my own design work. I would come out with the second thing I ever released, digitally, was a pamphlet for Troika called "In Service to a Sultan," specifically for Acid Death Fantasy. Like immediately after that, it released, and it was sort of like the genesis of me moving into bigger things, which starting with trifolds and whatnot. So getting to see all these pamphlets is really what got me on the way. And Panic on Pyramid Prime is interesting because it is like striking in terms of the design work. I don't know how inherently usable it is. It was one of the ones I read. I haven't touched it in like 3 years before thinking about this today, so I haven't run it, but it looks really good. So, that Troika pamphlet jam is also where Carnelian Riddle and the House of Indolent Blooms came out, which is from Mike Anderson, which has produced, still to this day, my single favorite, ran RPG session that I've ever done. So that was kind of important. And then we kind of follow along here. Getting back to They Feed on Fear. This was kickstarted in 2020. It was part of Zine Quest 2. And Zine Quest 2 is such like an important part of the indie community, and especially like the OSR community. That was when it really took off. And then it was in the subsequent years that Zine Quest kind of like hit the tanks. But there was like 98% funding for every proper Zine Quest 2 project. It's these big hits that people were getting because they were getting funded that would go on, and you still see a lot of creators that made their first zines during Zine Quest 2 making stuff today. So a lot of cool stuff really happened, during Zine Quest 2, and They Feed on Fear was one of these. It appears that this is Alexei's first sort of big project, as we would like to define them. Going forward from there, we would see, other stuff that Alexei's done is We Are Legion, Liminal Space, which I talked about already, and Night Fright, I think, are the big ones. At least those are the ones that also got Kickstarter campaigns. But Alexei really seems to focus on what I call non-traditional RPG play, that being weird things, like weird positions, playing weird characters, or just GMless play in general. Like I said, Liminal Space, unless I'm completely mistaken from when I read it a while ago, is a GMless game. And these are the things that started to kind of pick up in COVID and whatnot, as people had to kind of change how they played. But so they feed on fear. Like I said, it's part of Casino Quest 2. Is I would say one of the more successful projects. I don't have the numbers pulled up right now, but there was 737 backers according to the Kickstarter, and about $15,000 of funding, which is 550% of their initial goal. So people liked this one, at least from the Kickstarter page. The Kickstarter film fulfillment itself happened in 2021. I believe there was a proper release later in 2021. The current digital page for itch.io looks like it was made in 2022, but I'm pretty sure that the game was out, proper before that. And then there was a little bit of a bigger, I don't know if I call it bigger, but one of the bigger updates happened in 2023, earlier this year, to add digital navigation tools like hyperlinks and bookmarks and stuff here. So that's going to factor into our discussion.
I wonder why they got hyperlinks in 2023. I don't know. Could it be because I'm fucking annoying about it? Yes. Yeah, just to so liminal space actually does use a GM. We played it here on the show. Okay. I think they call it an architect. Basically, they're rolling in the various entities and rooms as you go through each of the rooms. Liminal is one of the ones they wrote with Willow J or with Neon Rot. They've been doing a bunch of, or I think that's the first thing they kind of did, I think, put out together. But I think that they've been working like kind of hand in hand-ish on some things as well. But yeah, Liminal is absolutely great. I would love to run that again here on the show. That's a fun one. I think They Feed on Fear is what got me into Lexi in the first place, and I actually think I followed the Sigilist on Instagram for a very long time before I realized that was also Alexei. After I saw the sigil for We Are Legion, I kind of was like, and then I saw the website and there it was. But yeah, so that is a little intro into Alexei and what we're going to get into. They Feed on Fear. Excited for this. I have realized that at least for this month's month of horror, next year will be interesting because we'll probably do this every year from now on as long as we're doing the show. I picked a lot of hell. It's a lot of like angels and hells and demons, and pretty much everything I picked is that. This one's one of the ones that's a little bit different because these are entities, not specifically demons. I guess they kind of could be, but let's just hop into the game and we'll kind of dig a little bit deeper into what They Feed on Fear is. So we'll hop over there now. And this is They Feed on Fear. So right off the bat, this fucking cover, dude. I mean, it's so good. It's so good. I mean, I'm pretty zoomed in here on the thing, but for those looking, it definitely immediately hits you with the God, what were those books in middle school? I know it's one of the inspirations too. No. It was the one that was scarier than Goosebumps. It's literally one of the biggest inspirations in here. It's the Scary Stories one.
Okay.
Did you not read any of the Scary Stories? It's not Fear Street, is it?
Fear Street was that Netflix thing.
Yeah, no. So this is what? Oh no, yeah, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. Did you never see Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark?
Fair. My childhood was consumed with reading a lot of Star Wars.
Yeah, no, Scary Stories.
I got into adult books, if you want to call it that, adult. Very early. I was an early reader.
Gotcha. If you just Google scariest stories to tell in the dark, you'll see the cover even has a big inspiration for it, and a lot of the art as well. This was Goosebumps was cool. I read all of them, but they were very like for kids. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark was scary as fuck, and the art was just so creepy when we were a kid. So there's definitely a very big inspiration for that. But for those in podcast land, They Feed on Fear is a fantastic logo, by the way. This is a really, really well done graphic design. It's a nice bold red. Beneath it, in this black, very grunge texture background, is this creature. I can't describe it more than that. Google what the cover looks like, and then the entire cover has a really great worn texture. Looks beat to hell, which is exactly what I would imagine any version of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark looks like now. And
I do want to talk about that, and well, for one sec.
The texture.
The grunge texture is apparently the grunge texture for books. We use literally that exact one for Zed and Two Knots,
Nice.
which is like the first scene that I ever made. And I didn't even find it. I was sent this by my co-creator to use on the cover of it. But coincidentally, it is only in the very first print run of Zed and Two Knots. We cut it for the second print run because it was such a pain in the ass to work with.
Really?
And it made the art look like shit on the front. So
I wonder
if you bought...
remind me to check out my Zed and Two Knots. I don't remember which one it is.
Yeah, the first print run lasted a while. I think they did like 400 copies. Some of them made it to like physical retail stores. Let's see how long it lasted.
Interesting.
So, Zed was a slow burner.
It's a nice texture. I really dig it. And the back cover as well, when we get there, is also fantastic. The version I have is straight from the web store. It's not from Exalted, so it doesn't have any of the tagging. I mean, there's not even like an ISBN code or anything on this. This is a very clean, crisp one. The back cover art is fantastic. It's a gosh, there's a lot of times where it's just going to be an indescribable, horrific entity is the best way we're going to be able to describe it as we go through. But the art throughout is fantastic. The in papers are faces of these just creepy freaking creatures coming out of like very scratch art style. Full in papers front and back. This version of the PDF is a little bit different too. It is different than the one I originally had, which is one I wrote notes on, but it has a second spread here of similar faces, but these are now in color and much more, I want to say viscera-like. They're very shiny and red, with dedication in the front as well. And then this, honestly, this page here, this is one of my favorite pieces. I don't really know why. The next one is this full page art of just a very fleshy, shiny red thing with a layered maw of teeth. No eyes, no anything else. It's just a very vibrantly red beastie that's I would not want to encounter. And then we get to the page. What is this? They Feed on Fear horror RPG, written by Alexei. Written by Alexei and Carl Scabaris. The dedication in the beginning is to Carl, I believe. No, it's to Paul Scabaris. I apologize. I assume that is a family member of one of the writers. Edited by Fiona Maeve Geist, a name that is honestly I see damn near as much as Jarrett's. And proof contribution by David Quinn. There's a huge list here of interior artists, and they're all the art through the entire thing. I think we both kind of are, I don't know, amazed by the amount and quality of the art for a project of this size.
Yeah, it's just a fucking who's who of horror artists here, because it's like Trevor Henderson, David Romero, Daniel Vega. Those are the ones that like immediately jump out to me because they're also in other RPG projects or products. But goddamn, that is a good list of artists.
Right? Insanity. I assume just having that background of that Alexei has, the connections that he's made are probably insane. I can only imagine. Another full page piece of art here. I mean, there's so much art and so much good art of just full page thematic creepy fucking stuff through the entire thing. It's just mind blowing.
Yeah,
Um,
this is something I wrote in my notes, but I don't know how Alexei afforded to make this with how much art, how much good art is in this. That 15,000 or whatever that the Kickstarter made just does not feel enough for like the quality of these pieces. Because like I know how much a full splash page costs, and it is not cheap.
well, he is one of the artists on here, so maybe he did a lot of the big ones, and I don't know.
Yeah, I guess the one it's I don't even know if I call this a disappointment, but it is inherently a little difficult to tell who did what. It's like I recognize Trevor Henderson's style, but I can't even guarantee that the ones I think Trevor Henderson did are the ones that he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, Daniel Vegas are the ones that I know for a factor their own, because the Daniel's got this incredibly unique looking style. So but as for the others, it would be kind of cool to know who did what here. But there's just so much of it.
Yeah, I mean, I bet you if Alexei would be happy. Well, I don't know if they'd be happy to, or if they even would. But I bet you they could tell us exactly who it is. But yeah, you're right. Like they're just, it's fantastic. And this does a really good thing. A lot of times when you have a book that has this many different artists in it, it can look a little bit disjointed. But I feel like they did a lot of really fantastic curation, and putting things in different areas, and just having artists with a similar really dark fucked up vibe, that it doesn't feel scattered. The art throughout, even though you can tell it's different artists, all feels like it fits well together, which I enjoyed.
Yeah, I mean, beyond the art itself looking good, this is a very good example of good art direction. Which
Yep.
is a whole entirely separate thing, and it probably helps that Alexei is also an artist too. So
I can only imagine it does. So this version here is hyperlinked. It's hyperlinked pretty like a lot. There's a lot of inline references in the book to other sections, and as I was going through, it looks like those are all hyperlinked as well, which is a big part of the usability, and it looks like bookmarks as well. So as far as digital tools, good job. I'm glad I waited to review this until after that dropped, but this is the table of contents. It kind of gives you a preview of what the layout through the entire book looks like. There's this kind of like off-white paper texture, which is fine. It's nice that it's not a crisp white. Crisp white in a book is fine, but reading it for 90 pages can get to the eye. I dark mode my entire life, including my job, so it's nice when this a little bit more subtle. The red kind of headers, black, everything else fits through this as well. At the bottom of each page, there are these two. There's a page number and these two like branches coming off at the bottom of each page, which is nice. And even on this page here at the bottom, this tiny little spot here on the bottom right underneath the character sheet page is a little piece of spot art. So I don't think there's any single spot in the entire book that doesn't have that has any level of empty space, which is cool. But I will say one of the critiques I did have, I think I disagreed with something in your notes. I wouldn't have minded if the there are, gosh, how many headings here? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, like 20, like almost 30 different like chapter headings in here. I wouldn't have minded if it was broken into maybe like 2 or 3 larger sections, where like maybe like a lot of the rules specifically for the player was in a section, or there's a couple of times, not very frequently, where things are redundant, but like there's a community section which is more about building the community, and then there's the stress and hysteria section, which also has like a community aspect to it too. So I don't know how I would really rearranged it a little bit, but I wouldn't have minded if some of the stuff, I'll get to it more as we go through, maybe had just a little bit of a different organization. But honestly, I feel like it's just me at this point, because me and Hunter will disagree with this all the time on what order things go in, if it's rules first or character creation first.
Even as like on a professional basis, the opinions vary widely. There are people you pay entirely to build your table of contents. broadly speaking, we'll get into this a little later. I was a little more favorable on how the sections are broken up, purely because I think this is one of those systems where you have to build your characters before you can do the rules, or at
Um,
least give context to what the fuck you're playing. Is sort of like my thought there.
so my thought, and this is what I have found to be in my mind, what the compromise is. Because here's the other thing too. I'm of two minds of that. One being the book exists in its totality all the time. You can flip to it whenever. You're not like the first time you read it doesn't need to be the only time you read it. So wherever orders it in, you can always reference the thing that you need, right? Like
Sure.
that's the thing. But I do feel like there are times where when the first time you read through the book could determine whether you even feel like playing the game. Like Blades in the Dark. I just don't want to. I read the book. And it's because I read the book. But I think in my mind, my compromise is a very brief breakdown of the mechanics just prior to character creation, and then a more expanded version later. Because how I view it is like if I'm doing character creation, how will I know what is kind of like important if I don't know the rules of how the game is played or the context
Sure.
in which, like, here's your ability. I'm not going to tell you how you use it, but like, here's one of them, roll for it or whatever. And it's just like, so I like I like when there's like a brief little, okay, this is what a challenge is. This is how you might use it later. And then we'll expand on all the different things you can do later. And not, again, that is a very, very small critique of this. I think for the most part, like it flows really well through the table of contents. There's just a couple times where I feel like I didn't get to a rule until it was like maybe like a third or even halfway through the book. And I was just like, man, I kind of wish I would have known like what an action even is or what an action even looks like prior to building my character. Yeah. Someone asked in chat, so is this game about being a monster? Yes, it is. And let me tell you all about that going forward. Again, another gruesome full page piece of art here. Sucking the essence from a child on a mattress. But let's go through the introduction. They feed on fear is
real quick. Stop back at that last piece of art.
Oh yeah.
Is this mixed media? Is this a model? Or is it just
looks 3D or it looks digital? It looks like a computer generated image. If you look at like the texturing on the mattress,
staring at the PDF, it looks like somebody made a model and then brought it into like a Photoshop and then did manipulation over the top of it. But I could just be looking at that wrong. It's a cool piece either way.
It's a possibility. I definitely think that this is a very I mean, a lot of it's probably digital art at this point, but you know what I mean when I say like it's a piece of like computer art as opposed to more of like a sketchiness to it. You can see in like in the essence or even in like the fog here, it looks a little bit different. But yeah, it might be a mixed media. It might even be like a especially the mattress bit might be like you just said mixed, as in like they brought it in. But it is gruesome nonetheless, as is everything. So They Feed on Fear is a semi-cooperative, horror-themed, narrative tabletop role-playing game. The players embody fear eaters, eldritch interdimensional beings that feed on a form of human energy called essence. A fear eater's aim is to be the first to accumulate sufficient essence to achieve its end goal. One person assumes the role of the provider and is in charge of describing the games, etc., etc., etc. Unlike most RPGs, the provider does not issue quests. Instead, players are the primary action initiators, determining their own path toward realizing their end goal. Both players and the provider participate in creating and introducing locations to a community. They Feed on Fear is about creating each fear eater's narrative, legend, and lore. So basically, you are an eldritch being, and you are sucking the essence from people and animals in order to build enough essence to achieve what you want to as your weird eldritch thing. Cool concept right off the bat. Like, you get to play the bad guy. I'll never not like a game where you get to be the bad guy. And the second it hit me, I'm like, the first thing I thought was, oh, Monsters Inc. because they literally like gather up the fear in the canisters and stuff.
That's funny.
But yeah.
Yeah, Evil Monsters Inc. Yeah, that's what this game is.
Yeah. Hey, I mean, they're supposed to be evil to begin with. It's not till the end that they harness laughter, but. So there's a warning before proceeding. Basically, this is your please use safety tools bits. This can get dark. Know your players, etc., etc. I like this. It's great that it's here. It's great that it's in a big, bright red box. We are fans of safety tools here. Here's the thing. If you don't want to use them, you don't have to. Just know your players. It is. I'm not even going to get into that discourse. What is needed, people and stuff. I do like that there is a breakdown here right off the bat of just the dice that you need is literally just a D12. And even this little bit here is nice to have at the beginning. This is kind of what I mean. It says the most common use is a comparison against a target number, whether desired result is above or below, and that is detailed in challenges, which is hyperlinked right there. And then other times, including the provider, the other times players will generate results and it'll always be on a D12. I really enjoy that it's one dice. It's interesting that it's a D12 because D12 is a very underutilized dice. I feel like statistically it's probably the most underutilized dice.
That was probably the genesis of the design choice here.
Yeah. And everything just uses one die. It's great. So it's nice, like I said, even just that little bit of mechanic in the beginning. I just feel like, even one more paragraph that even just talked about, like, you will get abilities, you will get this, you will get that. That's all I want, is just maybe twice as much as here. These three little paragraphs that just say kind of a little bit more about like what you actually get to and then go straight into character creation. But yeah. Fear Eaters. I'm going to read a little bit at the beginning of this, but we're not going to read the entire thing, but just to give a little bit more grasp of Fear Eaters. They're beings from elsewhere. Nothing concerning them is normal or natural. They do not possess, collect, or gain loot, gear, weapons, or equipment. Instead, they absorb emotional energy known as essence. It's not just emotional energy. It could also just be straight up blood and stuff, depending on your creature. They're supernatural, interdimensional beings that shapeshift, embodying their target's fear. They're typically solitary. However, on rare occasions, they cooperate, even hunting together in times of great necessity. Fear Eaters lack classes or skill trees. Mechanically, they have 2 attribute scores, which we'll get into. Not going to get into that too much. Essence pools, etc., etc. We're going to get to that in a second. And then there is the provider, which is the GM, basically. Provider is an interesting choice for this. I don't remember. Have you ever played, it's a popular horror video game on Twitch where you have a killer and you have people trying to escape the killer.
Dead by Daylight?
Yes. What is the bad thing called in that?
Oh, balls. I don't know.
It doesn't matter. We don't, but the provider, I'm curious why it's called the provider. I assume they're providing the story, but I wouldn't have minded if it was something like, if that was called like the entity or something like that. You know what I mean?
I think I took it more as they provide the prey. They're the ones who give you, but either way, I'm all for a gratuitous GM pseudonym.
Yeah. Oh, God.
Give it a stupid title. Hell yeah.
I love the stupid titles. If you can make it say GM or DM too, like, I love that nod to just whatever, like, especially DM, because you're not allowed to say DM because Dungeon Master is literally copywritten. But if you can be like the Dark Master or the Dookie Master or whatever you want to be, like, I love that shit. So that's just a quick breakdown of the game.
Before we continue, do you want to talk about layout here, or should I save that for later?
I think we've seen enough layout here if you have an opinion on it.
All right. I just wanted to kind of front load some of this because the introduction page is a really good like example of how the rest of the layout works in this.
Yep, absolutely.
So it's pretty straightforward. You have your small introduction, nice red typeface there. I know what this is. I just can't remember the name of that typeface. It's a really common horror one, especially in like novels. You'll see it on the cover of novels all the time. I have it written down somewhere. Then you get, this is actually a kind of a favored format of mine, where you have just introductory body text in single line or single column. Then the page will split to break down into double column. So I really like that personally, because I do it all the time. But then you have your big call out boxes. The big important warning is in this red box, and we'll see some more of those in the future. And then there are smaller gray boxes that have sort of reference text, is how I kind of like to describe that. It's like, more call out. So it's things drawing your eye to the attention. The typeface itself, I think it's Roboto. I could be wrong about that. I don't have the best eye for typefaces, but it's a common one. And if it's not Roboto, it's one of the same, line, your basic typefaces that look good. This has got to be a lower size. We're talking, I think it's got to be 9-point font. So it is small. And this is kind of why I wanted to get ahead of this too, because this text here is a bit cramped.
Like in the gray box specifically, or in the entire thing?
I think in the entire thing, and I get it. There's this stupid designer brain hat here. And it's something I've been teaching myself over the summer, so it's not like I have this infallible opinion on these matters, but this is a great example of a book that could have used a baseline text. And if you or the viewers are unfamiliar, a baseline grid or baseline in general is this idea where you're sort of standardizing lines hidden on the page with which to set your text. And it's a way to sort of create a natural spacing that flows through the entire document. So when you get 2-column texts, the text is always going to be lined up with each other, on both sides of the column, including like headers and stuff like that. So the spacing is always even, and it's always set to this baseline. Which I probably did a really poor example or job of explaining that. But what that allows you to do is when you use a baseline text is kind of spread the body text apart just a little bit and make it inherently more readable. Now, this is good. This is pretty damn good. I've seen some real bad layout before, and I've done a lot of bad layout too. So I don't want to like nitpick it. The biggest problem I have with this, and it's a pedantic little gripe, is that because everything is so condensed, because it's a smaller font size, and we're dealing with either a half letter or A5. I don't know what the actual size is here, but it starts to create this sense of eye fatigue as you read it. And this is a dense book. It's 100 pages. So if you're trying to get through this, and this is the exact struggle I had, is because I'm trying to read this before the review, and you just get to the point where it becomes a little bit hard to read. It just kind of all blurs together. I don't know if there's a perfect solution for this. You're trying to cram in a lot of text, and there's a lot of text in this book. There's a lot of art. And so you need to kind of weigh how the layout is spread versus how many pages you want. Because like if I had my way, this would probably be 30 pages longer, maybe not that much, but like 10 pages longer, just because I would like it a little more spaced out. But again, this is, a minor gripe at best, but we'll see these same issues kind of like throughout the rest of the text here. It's just a little bit too condensed for like comfortable reading if you're going to spend 2 hours staring at this book to learn the system. And then the little gray boxes that we'll see, it's just flat out too small.
Too small.
Way
too small.
It's like 6-point font in there. And I get the point, creating differences in text sizes has a visual effect. It draws your eye to it. And these are the call-up boxes you're supposed to want to look there, which is good. It's too small. One up at 1 point size and you're golden. You can even do it even smaller than your body text, but it's gets to the point where it becomes a little hard to read because it's so small here. And we see these, like I said, these boxes are spread all throughout the layout.
Yeah, I mean, when you actually read the physical, like it is small, tight, dense text. It's like mothership dense with a smaller typeface. And my old eyes, I definitely read it in the PDF. Again, I think it looks great, but One of the other things that I'm like torn on a little bit too is just how much bolding there is. I love bold. I love a nice bold. It helps my ADHD brain grab onto stuff. But I don't think, and I don't remember which game we reviewed recently that did the same thing, and I definitely took a shot at that for it, is when the same thing is bolded so many times, it starts to also become like hard on the brain. So like every keyword through the entire book is always bolded all the time. So every time you see the word fear eater, it's always bold. Every time you see the word essence, it's always bold. Anything that's a capitalized keyword is bolded the entire time. I'm of a mind that the first time you see it, or maybe through like the first section that you see it, bolding it and then not bolding it, just keeping it capitalized, just helps the brain grab onto the next bold thing that is important. If everything's all bolded, nothing feels important. But if the first time you do fear readers bolded, your brain goes, okay, that's important. And the first time you see essence, that's important. And when you get 30 pages in, you might see ability for the first time, and that's bolded. Okay, that's important. But if so much of it's bolded all the way through, the brain stops really kind of grasping onto like what's important. But yeah, as you said, pedantic layout stuff for someone who's probably done a million times more layout than either of us have ever done. But yeah. I will say I definitely read the PDF once I saw the book had a little bit lower font because it was a little smaller. I wouldn't honestly. I don't think it has a page count for it, but I will always prefer like an A5 size like this. But I think this could have been like a full size 8.5 by 11 book, and I'd have been completely okay with it.
Yeah, I'm kind of debating that too. Because the thing is, if you blow this up a little bit to a bigger size, even like a B5, just a handful bigger, leave the same text per pages, it makes it just slightly larger. You have a little more space to play with, and then you're golden. But also the problem is I like vehemently hate large sized RPG books.
And same. Yeah.
I can't use a full letter or A5 or A4, full letter A4 book while I'm sitting at my desk, and that's like the biggest thing. And it's such a personal gripe too. So I always favor the smaller size because I'll actually use it. But I do agree this one would have been interesting to see bigger, especially because of the artwork, getting that to blow up to even bigger sizes.
The full pages of that would be okay. So let's just get all of our gripes out here at the beginning. So I'll do this. I love the provider screen that came with the book. I think it's gorgeous, and I love these little screens. Realms of Peril did like a little screen like this too, and I love it so much. There's another game I have, I don't remember what it is, but whatever this kind of like just little gatefold situation is. But the problem is, do you notice anything missing on the GM screen when I flip it both sides?
Oh, is it just art?
It's just art. There's nothing on it. So I always just roll a D12, so I don't need to hide a D12 roll. Like it's always like, it's pretty, this isn't like a game where you wouldn't. So like, that is one thing I throughout this entire thing. I think you said in your document package, you got like a 2-page little, like all the rules broken down. I didn't get that. So send that to me at some point. I'll hit you up for it. But there's a decent amount of rules as you go through this. It's not hard, but I just feel like every time it's like, okay, and then another thing, okay, and then another thing, okay, and then another thing. I would not have minded some information across the back of this provider thing, and that would have made it completely fine by me. If it literally just had like the attributes, it had challenges, it had the especially once we get to the prey, like their reactions or like what happens with stress and stuff like that, even just a little bit of info across the back of this, I think would have been a plenty for me to be able to be like, I don't need the book at all. Yeah, because it's not hard, it's just kind of a lot. I would have been fine with that. But
yeah, and all that stuff you're looking for is more or less in that. It's like a 2-page reference sheet that's included in the digital package that I got. So yeah, that's interesting. I like I said, I haven't got the physical version yet. I assumed that that's all that was, that they took the reference sheet and put it on a little GM screen. Huh.
Yeah, but they did not. Oh yeah, this is fantastic. I'm gonna open it up so we can show that to chat real quick. literally one of my big critiques at the end was going to be like, man, I don't understand why they don't have a reference sheet, and I guess mine must have just not come in the package. But here, for those in podcast land, is a reference sheet, and for those watching, this is exactly what I wanted. I don't know, why wouldn't this be in the back of the book?
Yeah, and that's again, to get ahead of our critiques a little bit here. The reference sheet is great.
Fantastic.
It's just not in the book standard.
Yeah.
It's a separate file, and we'll talk about it a little bit later. There are a number of these tables that you're going to have to reference during play, and they're spread out throughout the book. And again, they're not hard tables. They're not even really all that difficult to remember once you kind of play the system a few times. It's just there's this reference sheet already made, and it's not on the end pages of the book.
Yeah, that would have been really great. Or, like I said, even just on the provider screen that comes with the thing. But
yeah.
Okay, so that's going to be a lot. I think that's a lot of the bulk of our critiques. So we're going to just cruise through the game itself now. We're getting to creating a fear eater. So basically, creating a fear eater has two stages. You have lore creation and your initial values. Lore is exactly what it sounds like. I think it's a great term for this. It's the lore is a fear eater story thus far. It's your traits and backgrounds. And as the player, you describe basically this entity that you are. So you go with a name, your elder true name, which I love, but I also wish there was some mechanic or something that made it more dangerous for you. Because everyone knows that your true name has power against you, but it never really comes up, unless I'm mistaken. You pick your essence type, your end goal, your physical appearance, a portrait, which could also just be a symbol, an object of power, and a layer. That's what you go through to build out your lore. So
I would say it's all pretty straightforward, but because that was the first thing that came to mind. But I don't think it's particularly straightforward, but I don't think it is difficult. The section here does a pretty decent job of explaining what each of those things are, even if this is a very high level concept that I think some people might struggle to kind of bring to life in their minds.
I think the whole game is a little bit of a high level concept. I think one of the other critiques I'm going to get to eventually is I feel like it would be the best way to play this would be very deeply, super bought into being an entity and hunting and stalking and doing all that kind of stuff. But I can see I wouldn't be surprised if more times than not, people that jumped into this played this as like a third person situation. It's kind of like how I felt when I was reading through Blades in the Dark, where I'm like, I don't feel like I'm playing the game. I feel like I'm picking actions and then watching the game play out in front of me. So I feel like I'd be playing in third person instead of first person. And I could see a lot of people not really engaging with the narrative a ton and really just engaging with the mechanics and doing stuff like that, where you're kind of, like I said, it feels like I feel like I'm almost a step back from some of this with the way that some of the rules are, as opposed to being deeply in it. I feel like this is definitely not I don't think it's written to be a game for everyone by any stretch of the imagination, but I feel like player buy-in would have to be pretty insanely high to really get everything you want out of this. Kind of how liminal spaces as well, where if you just engage with the mechanics, it's not very scary, but if you really dig deep into actually being afraid of the entities coming and how you would really react, it would be a lot more fun.
Yeah, and this is, I don't know if it's intentional or not, but this is a story game. It's not set up in the way that a Power by the Apocalypse game is or whatever, but when you start reading the rules, you read the intention of it. Yeah, that's what it is. And story games have this sort of inherent higher level of buy-in, and like Blades in the Dark, you're not even necessarily doing it or playing it in the same way you would a trad game. So that kind of will end up shaping your experience. You're there to contribute to a narrative and not to embody a character or to be lost in a character like you might in some other systems.
Yeah. I think Yeah, well, examples of play are interesting, and when we get to those, and there's a ton of those, which, and I love examples of play as well as, I think you had mentioned starter adventures in some of the notes that you wrote, is just such a good way to try to understand the way that the creator intended things to be played. So when we get to those, that'll be those will be interesting. So lore. So you pick a name. As I said, you pick your elder true name. You keep that very secretive. You pick your essence type. And so the Fairy Eater's preferred energy resource to be drained is your essence type. It's what you pull from your prey. And we'll get to essence a little bit more. But it can be any number of things. It's just a thing that sustains you. Your end goal, you pick what it is. But mechanically, it comes down to plugging essence into a clock that'll get you towards your end goal. You pick your physical appearance. You can shapeshift all the time, but you generally have a specific appearance that you kind of have as like your default. A portrait, as I said, they say representative symbol is fine. Actual image is cool. If I could draw like all the artists in this book, I would draw my own, but I can't. So you pick an object of power, which is an item connected that connects you to your original dimension or reality. It's usually within your layer, and then you also build out your layer. It is a dark, secret, abandoned location. There are a lot of generation tables that are great in the back of the book, and the PDF is hyperlinked to take you back to page 64 for that. Refining your lore. Once players establish the Fairy Eater's lore, they must share and discuss their choices with the provider. Basically, you can shape all of that out with the provider, with the other people at your table, and then there's some questions that can be answered as you go through, like how is your object of power displayed, how did you come to the community that you're in, etc., etc. Because this game can be just two people, as in a provider and one Fear Eater, or there can be multiple Fear Eaters kind of like in the community. So the provider needs this information to build out that community. And that is lore. And then you have your initial values. So once a player has decided upon their Fear Eater's lore, you do this thing. So your initial values are as follows. You have mind versus matter, and that's a score. You have physical versus ethereal. Then you have 20 essence that you start with in an essence pool, and your essence pool will change. It is your pool for pretty much everything that you do. And then you have an unfilled doom clock, which we'll also get to in a little bit. So there is a little breakdown here of what that looks like on your character sheet, but it's just boxes with those things at the top. But to break down what those attributes are, you have the mind versus matter and the physical versus the ethereal. So mind and matter... So here's the thing, is I think these graphics look fantastic. So there's a graphic that has mind on one side, matter on the other, and red 0 in the middle, and it's +1, +2 towards mind, -1, -2 towards matter. And then same thing with physical and ethereal. So +1, +2 towards physical, -1, -2 towards ethereal. So physical and mind are positive stats, in the sense that they are positive numbers, not positive or negative in the context. And then ethereal and matter are negative numbers. I really love this graphic because it can move. Your Fear Eater is going to adapt and change over time. We'll get to that in a second. So those are there, but then there's also this attribute wheel, which I'll jump to a little bit. I love both. I don't feel like there's a need for both. I would be okay with just the attribute wheel. And I feel like I don't know why I feel like there's a redundancy, even though I think I love the graphic and it looks really fantastic. What are your thoughts on the attribute wheel and then whatever these two kind of like attribute like bars are? I feel like it's just the same thing twice.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about I'll get there in a sec. But the attributes themselves, I think, are kind of an interesting starting point here. The way that the game describes it is that the Fear Eaters have two attributes. And these two attributes are each themselves a pair of aspects. So you have like the mind versus matter is one stat. Then the physical versus ethereal is another stat. And so it's this, it's a sliding scale. The system even tells you that, where, you're good at one and bad at the other. In my notes here, I likened this to lasers and feelings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's intentional, but the idea of lasers and feelings is if you're good with lasers, you're bad with feelings. and vice versa. But it takes that kind of concept and, creates the attribute wheel. Now you have two of these different competing stats, and how they interact is how your character is built, I guess. But let me take a look at the character sheet real quick. Yeah, okay, they do have the aspect modifiers, the little bars. I figured they wouldn't have the bars on the character sheet itself. I was under the impression, at least before looking at the character sheet there, that it was really the little bars were just there for helping you figure out what it is before moving to the attribute wheel. Because the attribute wheel, you stare at that thing and it's like, oh god, I don't know what that's saying. But when you break it apart, you show those two bars, and then you can kind of see how they connect. The pieces start to come together a little bit better, for me at least. So I don't mind them being here. I think it is a little interesting that those are also both present on the character sheet itself.
Yeah,
it's good design. They're
just feel like
really good looking graphics.
They're great graphics. They're clean and nice, and I like them. I just feel like there's one or two things that I would have liked to see on the sheet instead, and those take up room when I feel like there's just redundancy. Anyway, so as you said, there's plus minus on the stats, and I really enjoy when we get to the mechanics of why they are pluses minus, because when I first read it, I was like, well, you could just have pluses either way, and no, it matters, and we'll get to that in a second. But that's basically your stats. Like as Josh said, you have mind over matter. Let me just and then you have the physical and ethereal, and then I love the attribute wheel because it gives you kind of the breakdown of the types of fear eaters you can be, which we'll get to in a second, as you are in between all of those things. So if you're all mind or if you're all matter, that's one thing, but if you're between mind and ethereal, you can be a possessor. If you're between physical and matter, you can be bestial. And I love when things like this happen, especially in games where you have these kind of polar opposite things, and then you have to find this middle ground. It's so clean and well done in this. I really love the descriptions we're going to get to in a little bit. But those, just the graphic and the way that all plays out is really, really well done. It's such a good mechanic here in this game, and it being the core is fantastic.
It's a little difficult to parse when you first read it. But once you start to get all the concepts and figure out the rest of the book, it's like, this is fucking cool.
Absolutely. It's definitely one of those things where once I closed the book and then went back to the beginning, exactly what you just said. I'm just going to repeat what you just said. Once you get it, it's great. So types of fear eaters, we already described what a fear eater is. So there are math number of fear eaters. So there are protean fear eaters, which everyone is when you start. You basically have no specialization. You are just a fear eater that is you. You have singularities. These are ones that are pure aspect fear eaters, which means they go towards the primary. Like they are the physical, they are the ethereal, they are the, not mix of the two. So back on the attribute wheel, they would be like the mind, matter, physical, ethereal. They wouldn't be the in-between ones like possessor, spectral, and bestial. I skipped over this, again, insane piece of art that reminds me so much of Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, of this, this creature. Buy the book, look at the art. Then you have the spectral fear eaters. You have basically singularities are the primary four, and then you have the four in betweens. So spectral fear eaters are a mix of physical and mind, and they seek mastery over their prey's mental faculties, trapping them in illusions and altering their realities. You have the bestial fear eaters, which are physical and matter aspects. They've poured almost everything into the physical world, so their preys mistake them for corporeal beings. So they seemed as described, bestial. They feel more present. There are the possessor ones that lean into mind and ethereal. Again, the word is great. They are actually, they possess their prey to toy with them, leading them into conflict with close allies, turning their allies against them. And then there are the lurker fear eaters, which lean towards matter and ethereal, and they exert force on the physical environment. So more of manipulating things, moving shadows, disembodied sounds, things like that. All of these are fantastic. There is a couple times throughout the book, there are little gray boxes full of very thematic prose I'm not going to read it. You should buy the book and read them. They're great. More art. And then we get to essence and what exactly essence is. So this is what is drained from the prey. You pick in character creation what the essence type that you want to go with is, and it can represent a number of things: emotional energy, innocence, youth. It can even represent flesh and blood, especially if you're leaning more towards those physical ones. And mechanically, it is the fuel you have for everything that you do.
Yeah, I sort of liken this to soul, like you're sucking someone's soul out.
Yep, absolutely. And then you need essence to do everything, including leveling up. So I do like that, although it does feel like none of the mechanics are difficult. There are like a decent number of them. It's pretty simple all around. It's just D12 rolls and gaining essence, and that's pretty much it. You know what I mean? Like that's a core of the game.
It's a game built on a procedure of play more than complex mechanics and dice rolls.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I really like that, especially for this style here. So draining your prey's essence, you first successfully detect at least one of the prey's fears using detect fear. This is one of the things that I'm talking about for later, right? So it says you successfully detect at least one of the prey's fears using detect fear, but it never. I would have liked it to say you use like one of the actions. Like actions is a term used later to describe all of the things that you do, but you never really put the two and two together of like drain fear is an action and this is what an action is until you get to the action list, which is like 30 plus pages later. I wouldn't have minded if this said something, even just tweak the wording a little bit to like you successfully detect using a detect fear action or using an action bolded, you know, this one being detect fear or something. Then I would have been like, oh, okay, so like this is an action that I get to do, and I use essence to do that just a little bit earlier on as you're building the character early on to have a little bit more understanding of what the actions are. Because it wasn't until like 35 pages in I was like, oh, there's a whole list of stuff that I can do. These are the things that I can do with the character that I built.
Yeah, and this would have been even if the text itself doesn't change, it would have been a really great spot to put your inline hyperlink text reference, especially in the digital version. Or because we see in the next page here, or sorry, not the next page, the next sentence, you know, after which the fear reader can perform a drain essence action facing the associated challenge, and the challenge points you right to the challenge page. You pop a little page number by detect fear, and you know you can see that when you read the physical, but you click that when you hit the PDF, you pop right over to that page. It doesn't solve the issue by any means, but it is a little more helpful, especially if you're already going through the process of doing the page references.
Right. And here's the other thing too, is like it does say you can perform a drain essence action. There's a whole list of actions, an action table. It's interesting that like that word isn't bolded or capitalized or anything the first time you see action as a mechanic in the game that is an important aspect. You know what I mean? Like I definitely skipped over that every time I've read it where it said you actually perform this action, because it's just, to me, lowercase unbolded was just like, oh, okay, it's not a keyword, it's not a mechanic word, it's not a buzzword if it's not bolded like the other important things are. So challenges are made with the prey's target number in the drain essence relevant attribute. If successful, the fear eater gains its prey essence, otherwise it gains no essence. That's basically what it comes down to. You will do challenges against a target number, and that will determine if you gain a prey's essence or if you're successful at your actions in general. And then each type of character or each type of prey will generate a different amount of essence. This is another one of those things where we see the amount of essence drained by different types. And there's a whole section later where it goes more into the types. And I don't remember if this table, the essence generation table, is also in the longer version of the types later. And I would have been okay if it wasn't here and it was more there as this just an intro into types and then all the info you need in types later. So unless it is later, I wouldn't have mind moving this to later. There are 4 types of prey, and again, there's a whole section on that, so we won't dig too deep into it. But there's animal, civilian, threat, and chosen. But shouldn't this be protector right here instead of threat? Did that just pop into my brain? Isn't protector? Yeah. Animal, civilian, protector, and chosen. But on the essence generation table, it says animal, civilian, threat, and chosen. There it is.
Minor typos.
And then on this generation table, it basically says the type, the range that you could possibly get from each different type, and then the amount based on your rolls. So again, everything comes down to a D12 roll. If you drain a chosen and roll or the provider would roll after, you roll an 8, roll a 7 or an 8, you get 8 essence from it. And then you have your essence total, which is each prey has a total amount of essence they can have. There is another link here to prey profile, so we get to that later, but they have that. And then the prey has resilience, which again, there's a whole section for prey later, so we'll get to that later. Essence as a resource. This is important. So basically, as I said before, essence is the entirety of everything that you do. It's the only it's the only pool of resources you have, and you have to spend it on everything. So this is another part where like you see this numerous times, like how you use the essence, but having a breakdown of like essence, A, B, C, D, the various ways you can use it, I would have been okay, or like 1, 2, 3, 4.
Sure.
But Doom Clock completion is one thing that we'll get to later. Again, so Doom Clock, you fill in segments, and that is how you both advance your creature and advance them towards the end goal on the Encroaching Doom. And then when you use essence within an encounter, basically you have a pool and you decide how much essence when you first leave your lair that you're going to take with you. And that is how much you can use in each encounter. So say you have 20 essence and you want to take 10 with you, you'll leave 10 essence in your lair and you have 10 to use as you're hunting your prey. If you run out of that, you have to abandon your hunt, you have to abandon your prey and go back to your lair in order to have your essence. And if you ever run out of essence, you kind of quote unquote die, except you're an eldritch interdimensional being, so you kind of die.
Yeah, so this is that right here is where we establish the core gameplay loop. Mm-hmm. You start in your lair, you decide how much essence you're bringing and leaving behind. Your essence is used to gain more essence, but the key is the essence you drain from your targets is not something that immediately refills your pools. It goes into your layer pool, basically. So you will go out there, you'll spend the essence you've already gambled, in theory gaining more than what you started with, but you can't use it immediately. You got to go back and like digest it effectively. Mm-hmm. So you start in your layer, you go out, you collect, you head back to your layer, and that's the basic loop of the play right here.
And basically the reason that you choose how much essence to take with you is if you hit 0, you die. So if you don't take it all with you and you hit 0, you have the ability to go back to your lair and have essence still. So it's your risk thing. You could theoretically take all of your essence with you, but if you're out there and you run into protectors and all sorts of different things, you could die by not having any essence back in your lair. So it's an interesting like choice mechanic that they built into this for like how much risk reward do I want to have for the amount of essence I can use to hunt my prey and to battle them versus how much risk I want to have for if I somehow get caught with all of it out of my lair and don't get to drain any essence, how much will I go back to my lair with?
Yeah, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but your essence is used in effectively the character progression in the game. So leaving it at the layer is how you improve as a being, an entity.
Death and regeneration, as we said, these are eldritch beings. So if you were to die, you can regenerate, but there is a D12 regeneration table of how well you regenerate. 1 through 6, it's a true death. You're dead. Your character dies. and stages up from there. You have a crippling regeneration, an imperfect regeneration, and a perfect regeneration. And these come back with various aspects of how much essence you get back in your pool, and if you actually get to gain abilities as you increase your Doom Clock. I really like the regeneration. I like that if you go down, there's at least a 50% chance that you can bounce back. And I like that there is a range of how shitty that is for you if you do make it back. I love games that punish you for your bad decisions. Getting to the encroaching doom, the doom clock that we just recently spoke about. Basically, it is a 12-point clock. And as Josh said, to reach your end goal, how you quote unquote win the game, is to fill your clock with essence. So between encounters, Fear Eaters can spend essence from their essence pool to fill the doom clock segment. It is also your form of experience. So you start with it unfilled, and then you fill segments as you play, and you have to spend essence in order to do so. So you subtract essence from your total pool, and you fill the number of segments that you have, or that you would like to. And after filling in each segment, you record the segment's number on your counter. For every doom clock segment that you fill, you move one spot in any direction on your attribute wheel. So if you have, say, +2 in physical, and you actually want to shift your guy a little bit more ethereal, you can actually go from +2 to +1 and move back and forth across the wheel. And we'll explain why you might want to have negative stats in a bit when we get to that. But every 2 segments of the doom clock that you fill, you actually get to gain a new ability. So there's a graphic here that says how many segments and the cost of each one, 0 to 1 being 5, 2 to 5 being 10, etc., with 12 being the final one, and that takes a 25 essence. So you start with 20, and to just get from 11 to 12, it takes a 25. So that tells you how much kind of essence you need to build and grow your pool beyond what you even start with. And then there is basically the Doom Clock table, which realistically is a class table. I mean, I know there's no quote unquote classes in the game, but like it's the same as you would find at the top of like D&D 5e, where it says at level 1 you gain an ability and do this, at level 2 you do that, at level 3 you gain an ability and do this. And that's what it basically comes down to, is every other one, as we said, every 2 segments, so every other one you gain a new ability, and you may choose to move one spot on the attribute wheel, and every other one opposite that you just get to move on the attribute wheel. So every time you advance the Doom Clock, you get something at least, if you want to.
Yeah. And this is clever. I like this. And not just because it's called the Doom Clock, but it kind of sets up something we'll talk about a little bit about later. That this is sort of the end goal of this game is a longer campaign. You need a lot of essence to move these slots of the Doom Clock, to complete the whole thing around. So you're doing that core gameplay loop again and again and again. Over a handful of sessions, at least.
At least. I mean, that's the thing, is it's. I know there are actual plays online of this, and I would love to watch it to see how it actually plays out. I'm curious with the amount of essence you need, if it would start to feel redundant. Which, I mean, every time you go into combat in any game or go into a dungeon in any game, there's going to be a level of redundancy. But if you stay in the same community and kind of run into the same things, I mean, I know we'll get to Hysteria and there's changes and things. I'm curious how long a campaign is, if it's 3 sessions or 10 sessions, based on the amount of essence that you get on average session. That's what I'm most curious about.
My impression is that it's closer to the 10 plus, but I don't think I have a good grasp of that by the time I was done reading this book. I know it's not like 1 session for sure, but
no. But this piece of art here could not scream Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark more. I feel like this is the one where I was like, is that actually the cover? But it's fantastic. It is a creature running in the night with stringy hair. Again, you gotta get this book, or at least get the PDF and look at the art throughout this. If you like horror art at all, even just for that, I feel like this book is such just a fantastic piece of media for it. Getting into fear. So human prey and fear. And they feed on fear. So this is another just super fucking pedantic gripe. I am totally okay with books not referencing their own name. I don't like this line here that says they feed on fear, comma, all human prey suffer from fear. If you deleted that, it wouldn't change anything. I feel like it's just 5 words you don't need to have. And to me, in my mind, even though it's a rules text, I feel like anytime you reference the game itself, I don't know why it like kind of takes me out of it a little bit. But I don't know how you think about that.
I'm with the name of the book in the text type of guys. I can't complain too much. But this feels a little weird if that it's only here as far as I can tell.
Oh, it pops up a bunch.
Yeah. Oh, does okay.
Yeah.
So minor, like again, the most pedantic of gripes too. The system is called They Feed on Fear. The prey has fear, but you're actually feeding on their essence, which you gain their essence by causing or by figuring out their fear. So again, it's a little stupid gripe, but it was just...
Yeah. Well, I think Fear Eater sounds a lot better than Essence Eater. You know, more thematic. I'm okay. I'm okay with that one. So in They Feed on Fear, all human prey suffers from fear and possess 3 types: a universal, a major, and a specific. I love these. Basically, it says look at it like a target. A being your universal, B being your major, and C being your specific fear. And in order to drain prey of their essence, you have to know at least one of their fear types. So you'll do that with an action. And I like how it says basically use it like look at it like a target, where the outside ring is your universal fear, the inside ring is your major fear, and then the bullseye is your specific fear. So the examples here, one is Ginny suffers from universal fear of mortality, a major fear of cemeteries, and a specific fear of corpses. So that's an example where all of the fears kind of like tie into each other, but they don't have to. Another example is Paul suffers from a universal fear of darkness, a major fear of bees, and a specific fear of needles. So that I think the words are pretty self-explanatory: universal, major, and specific. So universal is very broad. It's dark. It's I mean, to me, I don't know, I feel like ocean is almost a universal fear because just how big it is, but like it's a very broad, like mortality being a great example of it, going all the way down to a specific fear of needles. I love all 3. And I love the way that it's used and even described as like a target is a great way it sticks in my mind.
Yeah. And I'll give major props to the call out box and the little graphic that's here. Because like when I read that first paragraph, the first time through the other day, it was like, what the hell is this talking about? And then you see the graphic, the little bullseye target that they have there, and the 2 examples, and it's like, oh, got it. There we go. Perfect.
Yeah. It's in the graphics throughout the entire thing, even the colors through them, this kind of like gray, dark gray, and red is the same thing that they use in the boxes, the same thing that they use in the attribute sliders and stuff. It's fantastic. It's not even like I don't know why. The fact that it's not like a cherry apple red, it's just kind of like almost orangish red, is so perfect. And I don't know why it is, but it just, I don't know, something about like the combination of the colors just really sets it off. Fear detection. So to drain essence or abduct human prey, Fear Eater must know at least one of the fears, as I already said. Fear Eater spends an essence cost and successfully passes a challenge. They roll on a d12 on the fear detection table, determining if a fear is detected, what the fear is, its type, and associated modifiers. So the fear detection table is a d12, just like everything. It's got 1 to 2, 3 to 6, 7 to 9, and 10 to 12. So the detected fear on a 1 to 2 is a failure, on a 3 to 6 it's the universal, on a 7 to 9 major, and a 10 to 12 specific. And then the more specific, the more successful you are, the more you get for it. So your result on the 1 to 2 with the failure, you don't drain any essence. On a 3 to 6, you can perform the drain essence or abduction action. On 7 to 9, you can perform the drain essence, or you can do all of that. But the modifiers you get for knowing the fears, obviously a fear, you get nothing. On a 3 to 6, you get nothing. But if you know the major fear, you get a +1 modifier. And if you know the specific fear, you actually get a +2 modifier. So the more you know about the fears, the more specific the fears are, the more modifiers you get to actually be able to drain the essence easier. Again, clean. That's one thing I have to say about the whole system is like there's times where it kind of feels like a lot, even though each one of the procedures is very simple, but it all feels very clean. It all feels very, very well crafted to just be like, oh yeah, that absolutely makes perfect sense. Is that the thing that you would also do, you know?
Agreed.
So if the fear detector detects any of its prey's fears, it can perform drain essence. We already talked about that. We already talked about the modifiers. You can detect a prey's fear more than once to learn another of the prey's fear. And the more, if you get all 3, that's just a ton of modifiers you're getting towards the thing. And when you gain knowledge from the detect action, the information is not shared with other fear eaters. The player operating the fear eater cannot act on this information unless they use detect fear. So it's not a meta thing. You can't be like, oh, they're afraid of bees, so suddenly if you're not the one that detected that, you can throw bees at them. It's very in-game knowledge. Animal prey and fear. Basically, animals are instinct based. They're less susceptible to fear, but you also get much less essence from animals, which makes sense. Basically, I think at one point later it says that, no, it says it right here. Consuming essence from this prey is a desperate act. So if you get to the point where you're literally scaring squirrels, you're at the edge of your essence, really. Another just insanely awesome piece of art here with this creature. I think the head looks very similar to the one from the front cover, but just kind of like looming. It's great. Challenges. So challenges are kind of like the core mechanic, because you use actions, but you do challenges. So basically, this is another time it says, and they feed on fear. Almost nothing is certain. You face plenty of obstacles you must overcome. 2 types of challenges. There are ones initiated by the fear eater and ones initiated by the provider. So basically, when the fear eater initiates a challenge, they get to choose what they're doing and what kind of attribute or ability that they want to use in order to do that. And the provider just assigns the target number to that. But on the provider initiated challenge, if a fear eater's course of action presents consequences that might be harmful, the provider will ask the player to face a challenge. Passing may mitigate consequences, but the provider decides which attribute and aspect the fear eater uses and the associated target number. So basically, whether you're initiating the challenge or the provider initiating the challenge determines who gets to kind of pick the specific thing that you're doing. Depending on an aspect, a challenge succeeds or fails. It is over. So we are 18 pages in, and this is when I was first like, okay, I understand why there's positive and negatives, because until this point I was like, why isn't it just +2, +2, +2, you know what I mean? Like pluses in all directions. And this, I would have not have minded way earlier to kind of give a breakdown of like, these are why you have pluses and minuses a little more clearly. So basically, the target number is determined by the attribute that you're using in order to do the challenge, right? So if you are doing the positive numbers, which are your mind and physical numbers, you want to roll over your target number. And after you're using matter and ethereal, you want to roll equal to or less than the target number. So it's a mixed system of, it's a roll over or roll under depending on if you're positive or negative. So having negative stats, quote unquote, into matter and ethereal isn't bad, because you will be using a roll under system, and the positive uses the roll under system.
Yeah, it's clever.
So
I don't
clever.
know if I would design it this way personally, just because I like, you know, a universal resolution system. But I will admit it is, yeah, like I said, it's very clever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the first thing I thought was pretty much the same thing, where I was like, I love this intellectually, but at the table, people are going to be like, no, wait a minute. Oh shit, wait, is that the over one or is that the under one? Let me look at my sheet real quick. There's like a little bit of fiddliness to it.
It's the biggest issue I run into when I'm running Troika, because it's an over and under system. Not quite like this, but, you know, in similar nature, where your own rolls, or I think they're roll under your stat, and your versus rolls are roll plus stat versus the enemy's roll plus stat. And every time, I love Troika. Every time I run it, that's the biggest hang up, is it's not a universal resolution system. So again, like you said, conceptually, hell yeah. I'd have to see how it operates at the table before I could have like a final opinion on it.
I think what I would do realistically is have different color dice for my positive and negative stats, and just remember that my black dice roll over and my red dice roll under. I think that's the only way that would stick in my head. But I can imagine more than once, especially early on, having to remember which one is up, which one's down. So mathematically speaking, my question to you is, because I didn't dig deep in my brain to figure it out, why do you think that the over has to be over the target number, but the under can be equal to or below the target number?
Realistically, because I think you had to choose one or the other. I don't even think it's a math thing. I think it's just like an ease of design. Unless you are doing a situation where you put the crit on the target number.
Yeah,
because I've seen, so I've seen systems do that. That would, I mean, if you don't do that, you just got to pick one, because either way, that would make rolling the target number favorable for both. And I don't know, maybe I'm just thinking about this.
Yeah, but like much. It's not like it would break it. Like if you did equal to or over for your over scores, it's not like going equal to or less. It's not like you're like, that's my curiosity, is why equal only on the roll under, because you could do equal or over because you're rolling positive anyway. Like it's not like the negative also exists when you're rolling the negative. So I'm curious about, I wonder if there's some math in a weird way that's breaking my brain.
Maybe it's because the crit is the nat 12 on the matter ethereal. Has something to do with that, or
but it's a nat 1 too, and mathematically, since you're only rolling one die, every die has the same percentage of roll. So I'm curious. This has this for example part here. It says if the provider determined the fear eaters are facing a challenge with 50-50 odds using matter or ethereal, it would be target number 6, and rolling equal to or less than 6 is a success. Oh, maybe that's why. Because technically, until 6. There's 6 numbers, and after 6 there's 6 numbers, but until 6 it includes 6, and after 6 it doesn't.
Yeah, because there's no 0.
Because there's no 0. So that must be it, because if you have to roll under, if you roll over, I don't know. I feel like that's a direction, but my brain said we need to move on. But I'm curious. I'm curious. I do love it. I love, that is the part of game design that I really love. I love being like, what is the percentage you get on 2d6 plus 1? Yeah. Crit fails exist. Everything gets worse. Crit failure adds additional essence loss, double stress, and hysteria. Attracts protector's attention, etc. And then sometimes the provider can issue challenges with risks. So basically they will say, hey, you can go ahead and do this thing, but there's going to be extra stress involved. And that's the thing that can happen. The cover art is the next big piece of art, and it is glorious and beautiful and fantastic. And then another just insane creature after that. So manipulations is where I got to, where I was like, oh, I would not have minded a manipulations box on my character sheet, so I know how many I currently have. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that makes sense. This is one of the things I didn't immediately understand, but
so I read this a bunch of times because that's the thing. I was like, well, why? This is when I got to the point where I was like, another thing, why? But how I viewed it, and we'll go through it real quick, and then I'll say how I viewed it. So what is a manipulation? Manipulation is when a player describes how the Fear Eater utilizes this environment and situational circumstances to provide a future challenge with favorable conditions. I feel like this is kind of like a well, I don't know what I hate the words that Apocalypse World uses, even though I love the game. But what is the one where you can like one forward or something like that? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know exactly what you're talking about, because I was just reading that's Monster of the Week.
Yeah, that's what this is. And I feel like this is the kind of advantage disadvantage system, where it's not advantage or disadvantage, it's boons and banes. and it's
Gotcha.
narrative. There's no use of essence at all in manipulations. I feel like it's just a way to encourage narrative play in order to give yourself a bonus, but that the provider can give you a bane if you put yourself into shitty situations. So to explain it for the people that haven't read it, basically exactly what that just said, you utilize your environment and situational circumstance to provide a future challenge with favorable conditions, and that's called a manipulation. Granted by the provider, it rewards the player with a modifier to any single die roll during the encounter where it makes narrative sense. A manipulation grants a +1 or a -1 in their Fear Eater's favor. Manipulations do not require essence expenditure, and no actions or abilities are utilized. A player can bank any number of manipulations during an encounter, but a maximum of 2 can be applied to a single challenge. Players apply manipulation modifiers before rolling. Unused manipulations are removed at the end of the encounter. That's it. So I'm going to finish this and then I'll go back to the example because that really helped me. Manipulations hindering Fear Eaters also exist. If the situation disfavors the Fear Eater, basically same thing. You can get a plus or minus, but in the bad way. And providers can use up to 3 against you or in the prey's favor. So, for example, a Fear Eater is outside a prey's window and decides to increase a creepy factor. No, this isn't the one I liked. This is the one I liked. In a different encounter, the Fear Eater knows that the prey fears snakes. No, this isn't the one I liked either. There's an example to play later where basically it says, I'll just read this one and go to it. So outside of prey's window and decides to increase a creepy factor by forming a claw with a gnarled tree branch and slowly scraping the glass. This activity costs no essence. Provider rewards the Fear Eater's player with the manipulation for creating a spooky atmosphere, and later the player applies manipulations to a drain essence roll requiring a suitable narrative. So basically you can adjust your environment a little bit to put yourself into shitty situations. Again, I go to Monsters Inc., where they like scrape something across the ground, where they like start to build the kids' fears before they actually jump out, and puts them into spooky, creepy situations. Where there's one later where like tendrils like go under the water unnoticed, and it's like, oh sure, yeah, that'll help you later on because you have these tendrils under the water or whatever. So basically you can give yourself a +1 if you narratively make things better for you in the situation before you start to create your action. And I once I feel like that's what it's supposed to be. Once I got that, I was like, oh, that makes sense, because for the same reason I said earlier, I feel like a lot of this feels like third person play. This to me feels like a really nice narrative mechanic that's not like a dice mechanic that will be like, oh, okay, like engage with the environment and put yourself in a good situation so that you can be a little bit more in the situation.
Yeah, it's sort of mechanical incentive for narrative use of the fear that you have already sort of detected, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I dig it, and you can do it a bunch. So basically, like I also imagine, like it says you can have as many manipulations as you want. So you could find your prey and just do a bunch of spooky stuff all around, really fuck with them, like, you know, chase them out of their room, get them to the dining room, do all sorts of stuff, build up a bunch of manipulations, and then just get bonuses to all your rolls because you made them so freaked out. I really like that. Next, distress and hysteria. So basically these are things that exist in the world. This is one of the ones that I actually was a little bit more kind of foggy on. So stress tracks praise awareness of supernatural events in the community, representing the Fear Eater's impact without role-playing every detail. So basically what it comes down to is every time the Fear Eater does something, it's gonna cause stress. And the more stress that you have, the worse things get for you, for the Fear Eater actually, as opposed to the prey, because you are putting the prey in the community on alert, is what it feels like to me, where they're sort of more
they're becoming aware of your existence.
Mm-hmm. Like they're even though they're scared. Like that's the thing, is like if you're just in your room like chilling, you're not going to notice like the shadow in the corner, but as soon as the shadow looks like it's moving, you're going to be peeking at that corner all the time, being like, is that where my paralysis demon is? So it's actually stressing the prey out, but it's making them more aware of what is stressing them out. So it's an interesting mechanic, because a lot of times stress is bad for the thing being hunted is where my mind would go, but it's bad for them but worse for you because it makes them aware of you. So
Right.
during a encounter, each participating fear eater has its own stress total, etc., etc. So fear eaters' actions and abilities have stress values. So you actually get to, when you are determining which ability you're going to use, you have to look at the amount of stress you're going to cause. And then prey have stress ranges as well. And providers may also increase stress if the ability is warranted. So if you put yourself in a super shitty situation, you could shoot the stress through the roof. And then in order to decrease stress, when any participating fear eater performs an action or ability that states it removes stress. So that's a very mechanical, like, take an ability at some point that you can potentially use to reduce stress, have a little stuffed animal pop out or something, do what you got to do to kind of like calm people down. Yeah. And then there is hysteria. So hysteria is more of a community-based thing than the individual prey-based thing. At the end of every encounter, the provider makes a hysteria check, obviously a D12, and it's based on the total stress that you generated across the encounter. So hysteria conversion table has stress, hysteria check, and how much you increase hysteria by. Obviously, it goes 1 to 5, 6 to 10, 11 to 15, 16 to 20, 21 to 25, and 26 plus. And it's a D12 roll. It's 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then hysteria increases by 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, or 30. And then you'll have a community response table based on the hysteria amount. So you build stress to do a stress check to increase hysteria, then use a hysteria amount to see what level you are on the community response. Level 1, you're just alerting neighborhood kids and stuff. Basically, you can alert different levels of protectors against you, all the way down to mass hysteria, where the entire community becomes a threat, and you basically need to I don't even know what you would do at that point. Like, all prey are considered threats. You have, like, they're evacuating the community. Basically, if you get to mass hysteria, I feel like that's like a, well, that sucks for you, like, point.
You lose, basically.
Yeah. There's nothing you can really do at that point. Yeah, community response to that. We don't need to dig through that too deeply. Daytime hysteria, basically during the sunlight hours, you double the hysteria added to a hysteria check because you're more visible, basically, is what it comes down to. And you can adjust it based on population and things like that, et cetera, et cetera. Love these two pieces of art here. They are absolutely...
This is, absolutely Daniel Vega that made these.
Yeah, the comic that he writes, like, just everything that this person does is insane. This would be like a dream, like, artist for like a in my opinion, for like a dark fantasy, really fucked up horror world. They're just so insanely, I don't know what it is. It strikes me in a way that I want to be struck. Prey, types of prey. So this is another thing where, like, I don't know, we've discussed this a little bit, and this comes out a little bit more. So basically, we've already talked about animals, civilians, protectors, and chosen. Not needed to dig too deep into those. Animals exist. Civilians are your basic kind of go-to targets. Over the course of a session, they could become a threat. Protectors are always considered a threat. Threat is capital and bolded. They believe in supernatural. They're ready to fight you. Protector's conviction is both a boon and a bane to you. And the core of a protector's ability to harm and resist a fear eater is belief, which is also central to essence. Thus, overcoming a protector often results in more essence. And then there are chosen, which are rare humans, often children that are just jam-packed full of essence. They're just real juicy ones, so you really want to get that essence from. And then you have your prey totals. Essence total for animals is 4, civilians is 6, protectors is 8, chosen is 12. When you're, there are 8 characteristics of prey. It is their name, their type. We've already talked about those 4. Their essence total, which I just stated. Their resilience, which is how many times a fear eater can drain its prey essence before they perish. Ranges from 1 to 3. So basically, if they have 2, you can drain them twice, and on the second they die. The prey has target numbers for each of the different abilities, the amount of stress that they have. So once you have drained that prey, how much stress is added to your track for hysteria. And then they have the fears listed for each one and special traits. Things like fearful, outspoken, relentless, watchful. For example, watchful says the praise matter challenges always have one manipulation in their favor. So basically, the special traits give a little bit of mechanical benefit against you for the prey that you're going up to. There's a whole page here of prey profiles, which I think are fantastic. And the book specifically says, just use these. There's a section later for like how to write them. That's cool, but just use these. Just change the name or something in the beginning. These are great numbers, and just go with that.
Love the Agent Mulder.
Yeah, a lot of them. Duffy the Slayer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they're great. Rover the Loyal Dog. Yeah, these are fantastic. More great art, and then threats. So as I said, there's a lot to this game. I feel like I'm like, oh, I must almost be done. And then I realize we're not even like halfway through the book. And it's like, okay, now manipulations, now this, now that, now that. And none of them are difficult, but I feel like, and I don't think there's too many, but there's a lot. Am I wrong? Did you feel that as you went through that you're just like, oh no, another thing?
This is kind of what I meant earlier, is that it's very much a game designed for longer term play. There's all these elements that you have to be considering and bringing in. And again, while the mechanics piece of cake, once you get them down, it's, getting that procedure of play that I think is going to be the trickiest part of this system here, especially because it feels like this is a game that wants heavy narrative contribution from the players, but then kind of, I'm not going to say dump because that seems pejorative, but it puts a lot of this additional elements on the GM to track like all of these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, even the reference sheet here, it's all the tables that you need, but at no point is there really like, I mean, you can read through the examples of play, and that's great. I love going through the examples of play, and then it'll give like the math after, which is also great. But I would not mind just a list where it goes, you do X, you do Y, you do Z, like, and it goes through and it says, you do this, but they are a threat, so that means this, so they do this, so that means this, so this is the action you get, so that means this. Like, just a walkthrough of like, yeah, just a flowchart would be fantastic. I love flowcharts. I want more flowcharts in books. So, threats. What are they? They are threats. I mean, the word is great. So most common threats are humans. Oftentimes there are protectors, which are always a threat, but there can be additional threat sources, and providers choose those aspects. And then using threats against the players, there's direct intervention. If a players give away their location or follow a predictable pattern, especially of an action, a threat may respond specifically. So for example, if a fear eater stalks members of the same family nightly, they might hire a monster hunter to track and kill you. That's a direct intervention by the provider to stop something that you do. And then there's the indirect intervention, which basically is indirect. So the example is Jake, an urban explorer, enlists the aid of a friend to watch their back overnight. The provider can modify the target number for the fear eater's actions because they are now 2 people instead of 1. So as opposed to another thing coming after you, it just modifies the situations in their favor as an indirect intervention. And that's kind of the difference between the two. There's a whole list here of the different types of protectors from kids on bikes. The first time I read that, I saw it capitalized earlier and I was like, is that a cheeky reference to the game? But then I was like, no, it's capital because it's an important actual thing in the game. But there's kids on bikes, concerned citizens, investigators, mystics, organized religions, armed forces, and secret societies from bottom to the top. So as you increase hysteria and increase stress and all those other things, these are the various different things you could go against, and that also might be like rounded up to get you. So they might hire an investigator, and that's bad for you based on that. And then all the way down on page 32, we get to actions, which is really interesting to me. It is, again, challenges and actions, in my opinion, should be like, if character creation is going to be first, the next 2 things should be actions and challenges, because those are like, in my opinion, like the most core mechanisms like to the game and the actual gameplay loop. And then everything else kind of comes from those.
Yeah. In general, I think I said it at this near the start that I like how the book is laid out, mostly in terms of like the sections. This is one that needs to get up in front or at least closer.
Yeah. Because until this point, like a lot of this stuff, I mean, I know it says use detect thing action, but like outside of like detect fear, very little things are talked about like what you can actually do. And I know how to do them, but I don't know what I'm doing a lot of the time, you know? Performing actions, you perform them. That's, we've talked about a lot of how it works. So basically there's an example here. You can perform the siphon action using the ethereal aspect. You send tendrils of phantasmal energy. I would not have minded, and maybe I'm missing it, literally like a 1, 2, 3, 4, like choose your action, choose your attribute, roll this, do that. Like, I'm dumb. Give me numbered lists of exactly the way I want to run it out. I love how much they say, for example. I think the examples are fantastic all the way through this, but numbered list and flowcharts are super helpful for a game that uses a unique system that people aren't going to be very familiar with. Yeah, we've talked about how this all works, and it's great, you know, but again, having it earlier and having it all in one place would be nice. Characteristics, each action details the following characteristics. It has a name and attribute, aspects, essence, course, stress, and description. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Actions targeting prey. When a fear eater targets an individual prey performing an action, the prey's target number are used during challenges unless otherwise noted. So for example, if you perform a physical drain essence and the provider uses the prey's physical target number, that's what you have to roll against. Actions without targets is the thing. There's other actions that you can do. So there is a whole action list, very important piece of information, 36 pages in, 34 pages in, all the different things you can do and how it works. Exit lair, return, fend off, commune, roam, stalk, abduction, and then other actions are just varies. And it gives the attribute that you use, the essence cost that it takes, the stress that you can accrue from it, and exactly what the description is of how you do it. Love this. This is great. I think all of them are really, really good. If you're gonna have specific actions that you can do, this is a great list for all the things that you could do. I feel like, you know, something like Apocalypse World, or at least the variations that I've played with, having like 6, like you can do anything you want, but like here are these. I think this is a much bigger, better list. And then, you know, there's other things you can do that just varies. But I think this should be in page like 10, not page 34.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, it does feel, even in the way that the book flows, just a little out of place here.
Yeah. Yep. I want the key mechanics of exactly how to do stuff much earlier. And if it's, like I said, if it's not before character creation, I want the most important bits right after. And I feel like we hit a bunch of stuff that, like, knowing the prey types and stuff like that is great, but knowing like how to do the things that I'm going to want to do to those prey types before even digging into like how to do indirect action, like indirect, you know, prey stuff, like I feel like is just more important. Abilities are fear eaters, or actions fear eaters learn and develop as they go. Sometimes they have an attribute prerequisite, and you can basically buy them as you increase your doom clock, which you've already discussed. So they have a name, a prereq, an essence cost, stress, and a description, and a great piece of art, and more art. I mean, I've never said the book has too much art, and I'm not saying about this one, but if I was ever going to, this one's close. But there is an entire page ability list here, and they're all fantastic. Total absorption, change of fate, aura of amnesia, cull hysteria, vicarious grip or grasp. I love these. Some of them have this prereq, right? So like frenzy, for example, you have to have a +2 in your PvE, your physical versus ethereal. It costs 2 essence, it creates 3 stress, and then the description is the fear eater lets loose an orgy of destruction, destroying a physical object, location, or prey. No essence is earned from prey. So that's one of the ones that requires a prerequisite. But again, every other essence you or tick on the doom clock, you have to do that. So campaigns, we've talked about this before. I don't know why this section is called campaigns, because it literally is just like encounter stuff. Like, I know this says sessions, encounters, and there's a whole tag on campaigns here, but it talks about rolling for initiative, how to reward your players, which is just manipulation and bonuses and things, if you're going to use time units, what they are, and then there's mid-level fear eaters. Basically, the provider and the player may want to run a campaign with fear eaters with more experience. So basically, this talks about how to not start at 0, like how to start at like mid-level, which I think would shorten a campaign. Not going to dig too deep into this, but it basically changes how you start the game with various options and the attribute values that you could start with based on which one you want to go with. So instead of trying to get to Bestial, you're going to start at Bestial. There's a whole section here on community, and this is really about detailing how to build it and how to introduce locations, because since there isn't an adventure, things are introduced as you go. Either provider or the fear eater can be like, okay, well, I want to say there's a school, and you're like, cool, okay, now there's a school, now it exists, let's slap it on a map and go.
This feels like something that could have just been wrapped under campaign as opposed to giving its own header, but mild critique.
But that's the thing, like, if that's what I'm saying, is if this whole thing is going to be a campaign section, then break the book into like character creation, rules, campaign. You know what I mean? I don't know why it's a little different. So that's how you introduce locations. That's basically how you create the quote unquote adventure, is you build this map out by either provider introducing a location or the fear eaters introducing a location. Here is an example map. I think it's great graphically, but it, in no way, shape, or form is this useful as a map. There's fear eaters all over the place. Are you playing with 30 people? You know?
This is your mass hysteria moment, the end of the campaign.
This is the end of the fucking world. There's literally like 50 fucking fear eaters on this. We're kind of cruising the end. We're going to get to the appendices in just a minute. There's a one-shot session here. Don't really need to go through this, but basically there is a way to play one-shot sessions, and what it comes down to is some variations in the way that the encounters work. Not really using the doom clock at all, because you're never going to get to the creature's end goal, and creating a winning condition. Since there is no end goal in a one-shot, you strive to create a winning condition similar to an end goal, but it's kind of more single session focused as opposed to like your final end goal as your entire existence as a being. There's a section here on prey creation, which again, there's 8 characteristics of prey. So, just use the ones that are in the book. Prey selection, again, more campaign stuff. And then there's a million examples of play. I love them. I love that there's so many. I think there's fantastic. I think there's like 5 or 6 different examples of play.
Yeah. And even the not just these explicit examples, the little call out boxes throughout the book are honestly probably some of the best examples of play I think I've ever read in an RPG book. They are very well written.
Well, the thing too about the examples of play is after the examples of play, there is this calculations breakdown of the entire encounter and like all the actions that happen, so you can understand how the math worked all the way through. I think that's freaking genius. If you're going to put this much effort in, again, I wouldn't have minded a thing that just gives me if A, then B, then C, then C, you know what I mean? Like a flow chart. Yeah. And that's pretty, I feel like, okay, so Appendix A is random tables, and they are just all the various things throughout the book that said, if you want to, go to this table. Like, here's a list of end goals. Here's a list of essence types. Here's a list of physical appearances. Really fantastic tables. Highly recommend reading them. It's one of those, like, make your own, but here's some super flavorful ones if you don't want to make your own. And then appendix, I mean, that just goes and goes and goes and goes and goes. And then appendix B is solo rules. So you can play on your own. Some slight tweaks, because a lot of this, it can just roll details or things, but it's really, really neat and interesting. You add an antagonist in, or you can, into the solo play, into the solo challenges, which is an interesting kind of twist. And I enjoy it. I think it's great. The solo rules go for a decent amount of time. We're not going to dig too deep into the solo rules, but it would be really interesting to sit down and actually play this solo.
Yeah, I'm not much of a solo player personally, and that's generally just because I don't have time for it, but they look robust and, well done as opposed to like an afterthought.
Yeah. One of the things I love too is the character sheets. We've seen this a couple times in books recently, and I don't know why. Instead of being in the middle of the book, they are right at the back where they should be. So you can chop out the very last page of the book if you want to make photocopies, but there's also a filled out example of a character sheet on here, which I love.
Yeah, it's a good call for a game like this where you might be staring at that character sheet even after playing the game and wondering what the hell you're supposed to do. So.
Right. And then that is They Feed on Fear. So we're going to hop over to our scores real quick and kind of cruise through these. And obviously it's a book. So for those that are unaware, or we give scores for various things. We have 5 metrics. There's art and layout, which is the quality, quantity of art in the book. Not only that, but also how well it's used throughout. And then the layout visually, not whether you can read it or not, but if it looks cool. Usability is hyperlinks, it's maps that actually work, it's how usable the entire book is and the different parts of it. The rule set, if it's adapted rule set, how well is adapted? If it's new, do we like it? Is it good? Does it work? Originality is exactly what it sounds like, but it can be a mix of all of the things above it. Is it new and unique art, unique layout, new and unique rules, lore, etc.? Value is really bang for your buck. If you, not just how much it costs, but what you get with it. And then each one goes to 10 for a total of a possible 50. And 5 on this is considered bang average, nothing good, nothing bad. It's fine. It exists. So average is 25. And that's it. So hidden art and layout. What are your initial impressions of art and layout?
I think we touched on a lot of this, actually a lot of these elements during the actual discussion here. This book might have some of the best horror art ever produced for a tabletop RPG.
Yeah.
And that carries like my entire opinion on the matter. The layout itself is good. You know, it's got that standard 2-column format, the call-up boxes. I talked about my minor gripe about how the text is a little cramped, and that would, you know, if we're talking score, that would, you know, bump it up if that was a little bit better or a little bit easier to read. But God damn, that art is good.
Yeah. I mean, I would
an art
put
book with
some of
tabletop
the
RPG rules.
Yeah. I mean, and not in the way that like Warpland or like Morkborg is. It's not like, you know, every page is a thing. It's just the amount of just full page art without words or anything on it is great. I think we try to put things like the small text and stuff more into the usability aspect of it. Visually, like, yeah, I like the layout. It's great. I think 2 columns, it works. It's great. It looks good. And as you said, the art's great. I think, what number are you feeling for art and layout here?
I was going to say 8. You know, the art is definitely like a 10 out of 10. And visually, if the layout was just a little bit better, I think I would have given it probably higher. But I think a solid 8 on my end. Yeah,
I agree with the same. I agree. I think I don't know how else you would put this much information in besides the 2 columns and whatnot like that. There's very little they could have done differently as far as the layout is concerned to really increase it. But the art itself is so good.
Yeah, just on like a final note on that. Again, I don't know how I would do the layout differently if I was the layout artist, but the one thing I kind of look for my 10 out of 10 is like, can I do that? And if the answer is no, that impresses me. And 2, it's like, do I want to imitate that? And this is, you know, They Feed on Fear. I feel confident that I could recreate that layout, which is good. You know, I like that it's solid, but it's not like blowing my mind with how good the layout is, you know?
Right. Yeah. The specific layout is extremely functional and that's great. Like you said, the art really carries this up from like a 7 to an 8 easily, if not from a 6 to an 8.
Yeah.
Usability. So, again, in 2023, this got hyperlinks, it's got bookmarks, it's got all the digital tools you could possibly want to navigate the PDF easier, inline hyperlinks, everything to look for. Great. Love that. I love that physically it does come with character sheets. It does come with a provider screen, but here's where a lot of the buts come from. It's just a piece of art on an interesting color. This does not provide me any additional usability for a GM screen. I roll 1 dice. It's a D12. I don't need to hide it behind a screen. I would have loved references on here. This is where I would like a flowchart of actions. This is where I would like how threat works. This is where I would like types of prey and stuff like that. This would have increased usability for me a lot. The map isn't really a usable thing. It was an example anyway, which I think is just more use for art. I think as we were going through, it really felt like some of the sections could have been rearranged a little bit more. And I think layout wise, in the sense of like readability, which falls under usability for me, like you said, it's a little bit cramped, it's a little bit dense. The gray boxes specifically are very small text. So I think it's fine. I think overall it's okay. I love that it has all the digital tools added, but I would have liked. I mean, the reference sheet is great, but it's really just a list of tables. It doesn't really tell me any of the mechanics I need as a GM or to remember. So it's okay. What are your thoughts?
I'm kind of right there with you. Table contents, hyperlinks, great. Obviously those weren't there at the launch and were added later. The bookmarks never showed up on my end. I don't know if there's a problem with Adobe, because I know depending on how you export it, sometimes there's weird stuff that doesn't show up right.
Oh yeah, no, they pop up great for me.
Yeah, that seems like it's an issue on my end because they're supposed to be there, so I can't ding it for that. I think the book has a decent flow to it. There are 2 or 3 things that could be rearranged, should have been rearranged. Let me be clear. That's what kind of dings it down a little bit, but I think it's good. It's functional. You can flip through it, and it's not the hardest book to reference. But the problem is you're gonna have to be referencing those pages because there isn't that the reference sheets in the book. And so like I would have been, a couple of points higher just if there had been those reference sheets alone. But other than that, it seems functional. I don't have much of an issue with the usability here. It's pretty standard to slightly above the board in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, so again, 5 means nothing good, nothing bad. I mean, I think we do have some good things to say. We do have some bad things to say. In my opinion, for me, this is sitting just above average. For me, this feels like around a 6-ish for me because of like even just having the provider sheets in the book or any information on the GM screen would have bumped it up to a little bit higher than that for me. But what are your thoughts?
Yeah. I was initially thinking 7, but I think having discussed the 6 makes I'm perfectly okay with that. Again, it's good, it's functional. It's just a couple of small tweaks and it'd be considerably better.
Yeah, that's exactly rule set. So what's your take on rules?
All right, so the rules, they're clever, they're unique, I like them. I don't know if I understand them. So I've only read this book once. I haven't brought it to the table, and that's a vast amount of the experience comes from running and learning the system. So part of my kind of final thoughts here is shaped by that, and it's only on a read. And some of this is how the rules are described. I don't know if that means a different editing hand or whatever. Fiona Geist is a really good editor, so I don't know if it's that more specifically of how sort of abstract some of these concepts are. The 2 attributes but have 2 elements as part of those attributes is a little bit confusing and probably could have been explained a little bit better, even though I do like the end result. And in terms of the rules, I think this is something we a little disagree on, but the system really wants you to push this game into full campaign play. I just don't think the majority of groups are going to be using the procedure to generate the campaigns in the way that the rule set would like you to do. And I don't know if that's a failing on the rules part or more of just like my sort of jaded take on it. But for me, this would have sung a lot better if it was tweaked just a little bit to gear it more towards shorter arcs and then had like here's how you blow this into an extended campaign. And that's primarily because I only play short arcs, so I can play a lot. But I think if you had made some of those tweaks, a bit of our confusion would probably have been a little less so, because it would have been a little more straightforward, a little less complex of a procedure. And then it kind of lets you focus on the core experience rather than this whole, extended thing. If that makes sense.
It does. I think one of the problems, first of all, I love the rule set. I think it's clean as fuck. I love the plus minus. I love how all the math works out as far as, I mean, except for the minus over because I still don't get that. But I like the roll over under situation. I think what the same thing you're saying, I think I'm kind of saying the same thing or a very similar thing, is that it's not that there are rules that I have issues with. It's the way that they're laid out and the way that they're explained a little bit. It could be explained a little bit better. And I think, as I said, a flowchart or something. Because here's the thing: one of the core components of the entire game, we skimmed through at the end because it's an appendix, and that is how the fuck do you even play the game? There is no map. You have to put out, like, you have to introduce locations and stuff. That is like 40 something pages into the book. That is literally one of the core parts of the entire game experience, is challenges, attributes and stuff. But how do you even get to the prey to hunt it? You have to introduce part of the community that you're going to go to. So I feel like if there was, near the very beginning, not necessarily an example of play, but really a breakdown of the play loop, or even a separate reference sheet that literally had a breakdown of, like, what do you do? Okay, you introduce a location, so you leave your lair, like, breakdown of everything. I think that would decrease so much confusion and increase so much. That does fall a little bit into usability for me, but overall in the rule set, I really like it. I think it's really clever. I think it's really smart. I think it's got a lot of interesting, fun things that I really want to play with. For me, if it had that little bit more, so there's a little bit more kind of understanding in that initial loop, this would probably be around an 8 for me. But I think it fits around a 7 for me, because of how fun and interesting the mechanics are. This is one of those ones that, like, once I get it to the table, it could easily become a 6 or it could easily become an 8. So sure, for me, I feel like it's right around a 7. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I kind of agree with that. My initial number was a 6, because I was kind of sitting with this last night thinking of how I overall thought of it. But, having this conversation and getting to have, you kind of help me with some of the details here, I think it kind of ups my take on it. So I'm good with a 7 too.
Yeah. Like I said, this is one I would love to give an 8 to. I really love the system. Even if you take out all the horror stuff, just the math of, like, the plus and minus, roll over, roll under, I really enjoy it. It's just, like I said, a little bit better explanation on the loop. Okay, so originality. I mean, you play monsters sucking energy, your evil monsters Inc., and I love it. It's fantastic. I think it's got some interesting mechanics in the rules. I think it's got a lot going for it. It's got a lot. What are your thoughts on originality?
So I think you'll agree with me on this, but my 10 for originality is Necronautilus, which is the perfect example of how originality is taken in concept and execution in terms of mechanics, where you're playing noxious, vaguely humanoid shapes, clouds of gas that serve as the agents of death in their galaxy-like domain. And the mechanic is built around the subjectivity of language and how that changes based on how you break apart, words and spelling. And it's like, all right, that's like fucking 10 out of 10. Let me get to this. And it's not to disparage this, because this is, you're playing horrors that suck out human souls. Like, it's hard to find any more originality than that. Like, the only thing that I've come across, there's probably more than this. There's the World of Darkness stuff where you're evil villains, but recently there was the Hull Breach book for Mothership that has a section in there that's called Manhunt, and that's just, you get to play the horrors and go kill a bunch of humans. And I think that that's a much more straightforward version of this type of concept. But here you're like, you don't even have a form. You can change eldritch, this eldritch being that can change how they look and how they act in service to some other eldritch being, and then you suck out human souls. I was like, all right, that's pretty good. I do wish the mechanics were a little more original, and that's not to say that they aren't. This isn't a hack. This is as far as I can tell, a bespoke system that isn't based on anything. I don't know how I would design this, but in the way that Necronautilus is a 10 because its core concepts are enforced by its mechanics, I wish there was something just a little bit more to the system. I don't know what that something is, but
yeah, I agree. And now I understand the note that you made about Necronautilus. And yes, I'm pretty sure Necronautilus is the only game we've ever given a 10 to in originality. I'm pretty. We might have given one other, but now I see what you mean. And yes, that is exactly it. And it's because the concepts and the rules and everything. There's so many things where just like fuck, whoa, like and like you said with the rules on this, like I like them. They're clever. They're clean. But as far as originality goes, you're rolling a d12, you have pluses and minuses, things like that. You're not literally creating powers from words and shit. You know what I mean? Like, so I agree with you there. A lot of fun, interesting, original concepts. I mean, I do enjoy it. What are your thoughts on a score for this?
I was thinking a 9, but as I kind of thought about it and how it compared to Necronautilus in my head, I dropped that down a little bit to an 8. But it's honestly, you ask me any given day, and it could be anywhere from 8 to 9. So
yeah. I agree with that. I think 8 works really well. Again, we've only ever given one 10, so 10s are pretty much out of reach. So we go to a scale of 9 a lot of the times, at least in my brain. And this to me feels like maybe like just 1 or 2 interesting little tweaks that would go to a 9. So 8 feels good for me. Yeah. And then value. I think you wrote down at some point you wrote down costs and everything like that.
Yeah, so I can break this down real quick. My thoughts. Yeah. On itch.io, the PDF is $12. If you buy through physical on the Store Envy shop, which I think is run directly by Alexei, it's $24. It includes the rule book. It's 100 pages. The GM screen that apparently isn't much of a GM screen. You get a sticker, you get a collectible card, and then you get that double-sided character sheet map. Inside the book, it's set up primarily for campaigns, so you can get extended play out of it, but it also has that little section on running one shots, which is great. I love that. And it has solo rules, which again, fuck yeah. And it's robust solo rules. It's not just like a one-page thing. Another cool thing we didn't talk about, there's a third-party creator like license right in the back of the book. So if you want to make something for this, there you go. There's your permission to do so. So in terms of value, it's like fuck great. This should be $40. If you're buying the physical version, especially with all that art in it.
Yeah, I mean, if this is hardback, I would say $40 for sure. I think $24 for all the stuff that you get with it is a fucking steal. It really, really is. Yeah. And you hit on a lot of things that we talk about when we go over this. The third-party license is one of the most important things. Like, I don't understand why anyone in 23 doesn't want more people to make their shit, make stuff with their games. But yeah, there's the only thing that would add more to this is something that doesn't apply to this game. So we talk about like online generators or adventures and stuff. You don't need online generators for this because you literally develop the lore as you play and stuff, and you don't need adventure for this because you don't make adventures. There are the tables to begin your community, and that's it. So anything that would add more to this like isn't necessary for this game. So yeah, what are your thoughts on a number there?
So this would be a 10 for me, if not for one thing. And the problem is my gripe here is really difficult to solve with this system specifically. And it's that I want an included adventure, but this game doesn't work on the traditional adventure setup. So I don't know what form that would take. Maybe like a community that's ready to go, something you could pick up and run to immediately and set it up so that it is ready to add those additional elements that you build during play. Again, this is my problem with this gripe here is I don't know how to make it work, but I'm not the author of the system. So yeah. I think it's a solid 9 for value for me.
Yeah. So the only games that have gotten 10s for us are games that are literally free. Like you can literally go to mousereader.com, play Mousereader, like download every resource you could possibly want. Like there's like generators out the ass, that's 10s and everything like that. Like you said, starting adventure, it wouldn't be a bad idea to maybe have just like the bones of a community so that it can be like, oh, here's a school, here's this, here's that for maybe like not even like a starting adventure, but like this is a kickstart point for your first session, just so you're not starting from scratch and you understand. Yeah, I mean, I'm between an 8 and a 9 on value for this because I just don't know what else you could possibly add for it, and for the cost, $24 is crazy. So yeah, I mean, I'm good with a 9 for this for value. This is about as high a score as you can get without it being fucking free. So that's it. So this is this is a high scoring game, and I think it should be. I think, again, almost all of our gripes, and this is how this works all the time on the show, are like nitpicky, pedantic bullshit. But that's kind of the point of the show, is that if everyone's just like, oh, this is great, but no one goes, but if you tweak this tiny bit and you tweak that a tiny bit, that's how you can get stuff from really good to great, in my opinion. And this gets a 38. So the only thing that really dropped it a lot is the usability, and that's just a little bit of cleanup in like some of the way that the layout is, and some of the sections would really bump that up, to a little bit more. And then just a better explanation of the core loops and things would bump the rule set up, and this could easily be up in the 40s, which is, kind of top tier games. We only have like, 5 or 6 games that are in the 40 plus. So 38 for They Feed on Fear, I think is a fantastic score. I really enjoy this game. I would love to bring it to the table. We've already played Liminal from Alexei on the show over on the TAA side. So I think an actual play of this at some point would be fantastic as well. And that is the end of our They Feed on Fear month of horror adventure. Josh, thank you so much for being here.
Sure.
Really appreciate it. Any quick promo you want to throw out where people can find your stuff, or what's coming up with Liminal Horror at all?
I got to skedaddle, so I won't be too long with this, but you can find me on social media at unenthuser. That's my little tag there. It's unenthusiastic user smashed into one. But the big thing, go look at Space Penguin Inc. so you can pick up the Bloom in print. If you're catching this, yeah, there you go. If you're catching this live, there should still be the 13% off for Friday the 13th promo. But if you catch it during the week, you missed out. But go get that. And we also got like new merch and stuff for Liminal Horror. But keep an eye on Space Penguin. That's where the most of my physical stuff is going to be for the foreseeable future.
Fantastic. Love Space Penguin. Can't wait to see when they do more. You know where all our stuff is. Linktree for the weekly scroll. Again, Josh, thank you so much for coming on. You will see more of Josh on the show. And